There are moments in a life that don't announce themselves as turning points. They arrive quietly, like rain on a still afternoon, and only later, sometimes much later, do you understand what they truly meant. This is a story about one of those moments, and it begins on a gray Tuesday in September, on a two-lane road just outside of Macon, Georgia, where a woman named Dorothy Elaine Mercer was driving home alone for the first time in 23 years. Dorothy was 54 years old that autumn. She had warm brown skin, deep-set eyes that held more stories than she often shared, and a habit of pressing her lips together when she was trying not to cry. She stood about 5'6", and on most days she carried herself with a quiet dignity that people tended to notice without quite being able to name. That Tuesday, though, she was wearing a yellow dress she had bought herself that very morning, not because she needed a new dress, but because the woman in the mirror had looked so tired, so hollowed out, that Dorothy had thought, maybe a bright color will help. Maybe yellow will remind me that the sun still exists somewhere behind all these clouds. The divorce had been finalized 3 days earlier. 23 years. A house on Clover Mill Road. A garden she had planted herself in the backyard, with tomatoes and black-eyed Susans and a rose bush that had taken 4 years to bloom properly. A shared life, with all its ordinary textures, Sunday dinners and grocery lists, and the particular way the light fell through the kitchen window on winter mornings. All of it now officially behind her. Signed, sealed, divided. Her daughters Renee, who was 21, and Patricia, who was 19, were both away at school. They had called her that morning, one after the other, each one trying to sound cheerful in that careful way young people do when they are worried about their mothers. Dorothy had reassured them both. She was fine. She was going to be just fine. She wasn't sure she believed it yet, but she was trying. The rain started somewhere around mile marker 47. Soft at first, then insistent, then the kind of rain that makes you grip the steering wheel a little tighter and slow down without quite deciding to. Dorothy turned on her wipers and leaned forward slightly in her seat, the way her own mother used to do in bad weather, as if sitting closer to the windshield might help you see the road more clearly. She was thinking about the rose bush. She wondered who would take care of it now. She wondered if it would miss her, which she knew was a foolish thought, but grief has a way of making you tender toward things that can't feel anything, because the tenderness has to go somewhere. That was when she saw it. At first, she wasn't sure what she was looking at. Something small and dark, huddled at the base of a wooden utility pole at the edge of the road. She slowed the car instinctively, the way you do when something catches your eye, and your body knows to pay attention before your mind has fully caught up. She pulled to the shoulder and stopped. Through the rain-blurred window, she could see it clearly now. A puppy. Small, maybe 8 or 9 weeks old. She would later think, with a brown and black coat soaked flat against its tiny body. It was lying on its side in the wet gravel, and its front left leg was bent at an angle that made Dorothy's chest tighten immediately. Injured, scared, and absolutely heartbreakingly alone. She sat in the car for just a moment, then she opened the door. The rain came down on her yellow dress immediately, soaking through the fabric before she had even reached the front of the car. She didn't run. She walked slowly, instinctively, the way you approach anything frightened, with patience, with your hands open, with your whole body saying, "I am not a threat. I am not here to hurt you." She crouched down a few feet away from the puppy and looked at him. He looked back at her. His eyes were amber-colored, and even through the pain and the fear, there was something in them that Dorothy would later describe to her daughter Renee as old, like he had already seen some things and was trying to decide whether this particular human was worth trusting. "Hey, sweet boy," she said softly. "I see you." She reached her hand out slowly, palm up, fingers relaxed. The puppy flinched at first, pulling its head back, and Dorothy kept her hand exactly where it was and waited. The rain fell between them. A car passed on the road behind her, close enough that she felt the rush of air, and she didn't move. The puppy stretched its nose forward and sniffed her fingers. Then, slowly, it pressed its cold, wet head into her palm. Dorothy felt something shift inside her chest. Something that had been locked up tight for months, maybe longer, loosened. Just slightly. Just enough. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, let's get you out of this rain." She carried him to the car carefully, one hand supporting his injured leg, and she laid him on the passenger seat on top of the light cardigan she kept folded in the back. He trembled the entire way to the emergency veterinary clinic in town, and Dorothy talked to him the whole drive, not about anything in particular, just a steady, quiet stream of words. The weather, the road, how the town had a good vet, she was almost certain of it. How he was going to be all right. She didn't know if she was talking to the puppy or to herself, perhaps both. The vet, a kind, matter-of-fact woman named Dr. Sylvia, confirmed that the leg was fractured. It would need to be splinted. He was malnourished, likely separated from his mother too early. He was, she said gently, lucky that someone had stopped. Does he belong to you? Dr. Sylvia asked, looking up from her examination table. Dorothy opened her mouth and then closed it again. She thought about the empty house waiting for her on Clover Mill Road. The house she was renting now, a small, clean two-bedroom just off Magnolia Avenue, with a yard that nobody was using. She thought about the particular silence of sleeping alone after 2 decades of not doing so, and how that silence had a texture to it, almost physical, that she was still learning to exist inside. Yes, she said, I believe he does. She named him Samson. It seemed right, somehow a name that meant strength, given to this scrap of a thing who had survived the road and the rain and whatever had come before. Dr. Sylvia fitted him with a small splint and sent Dorothy home with a bag of supplies, a list of instructions, and a smile that said she had seen this particular story play out before and was glad of it. The first few weeks were not easy. Samson needed to be fed every few hours. He needed warmth and careful handling. He was suspicious of sudden movements and loud noises and anything that reminded him, Dorothy suspected, of whatever his life had been like before the road. Dorothy understood that particular feeling completely. She bought him a small plaid bed and placed it in the corner of her bedroom, and on the first night, when he whimpered in the dark at 2 in the morning, she climbed out of bed and sat on the floor beside him and stroked his ears until he quieted. She sat there for a long time, in the stillness of her new house, with this small, damaged creature breathing softly under her hand, and for the first time since the papers had been signed, the silence felt less like an absence and more like a beginning. That autumn turned to winter, and winter gave way to spring. Samson healed, the splint came off, and he moved with only the faintest hitch in his left front step, something Dr. Sylvia said would likely always be with him, but would never hold him back. It did not hold him back. He was, as it turned out, a German Shepherd mix with more energy and devotion than Dorothy had quite anticipated, and he took to following her from room to room with the sort of absolute, uncomplicated loyalty that she found both amusing and quietly deeply moving. She had never had a dog before. She had not known what it felt like to be greeted at the door as though your arrival were the best thing that had happened all day, every single day, without exception, without condition. She had not known how much she needed that. She began to take him on evening walks through the neighborhood, long, unhurried walks that became a kind of meditation for her. Samson trotting alongside her, nose to the ground, discovering the world 1 cent at a time, while Dorothy rediscovered her own city, her own life, her own pace. She noticed things she hadn't noticed in years. The way the old oak trees on Caldwell Street formed a canopy that looked particularly beautiful in early April. The small library 2 blocks from her house that had a community board covered in handwritten flyers. The bench near the park fountain where an older man named Harold sat most mornings feeding the pigeons and who had, over the course of the winter, become someone she nodded to, then waved to, then eventually stopped to talk to. Small things, simple things, the kind of things that make a life. Renee came home for the summer after her junior year and met Samson for the first time with the particular wariness of a young person who grew up in a pet-free household. Within 48 hours, she was sleeping on the floor with him and calling Dorothy to say, in a voice of some amazement, "Mama, how did you not always have a dog?" "I am learning a lot of things lately," Dorothy told her. That was true. At 54, Dorothy was learning things she had not expected to be learning. She had gone back to something she had put aside years ago. She had always loved to draw, had a talent for it as a girl, and somewhere in the chaos of marriage and motherhood and all the responsibilities that accumulated over 2 decades, she had simply stopped. She started again that winter, small sketches at first, done at the kitchen table while Samson slept at her feet, then larger ones. Then, eventually, watercolors, soft washes of color, landscapes mostly, the kind of quiet scenes that ask nothing of the viewer except a few minutes of stillness. She wasn't sure they were good. She wasn't sure it mattered. The doing of it was what she had missed. 2 years passed. 2 years from the day she had pulled to the shoulder of that rain-soaked road and opened her car door and walked toward a small, frightened thing that needed her. On a Sunday evening in late September, Samson's second birthday, which Dorothy had marked with a special biscuit from the bakery in town that made dog treats in the shapes of fire hydrants and bones, Dorothy was sitting on her back porch watching the last of the daylight fade. Samson was stretched out beside her chair, his large head resting on her foot with a contentment so complete it made her smile every time. Her phone rang. It was Patricia. "Mama," Patricia said, "I just want to tell you something." "All right," Dorothy said. "I was talking to Renee last night, and we were both saying we think you seem happier. Like, actually happy. Not fine, not okay, but genuinely happy. And we wanted to tell you that we noticed." Dorothy looked down at Samson. His amber eyes were half closed in the drowsy, golden way they got in the evening. His breath rose and fell steadily. The scar on his front left leg, faint now, barely visible under the fur that had grown back full and thick. She thought about a rainy Tuesday 2 years ago, a yellow dress, a road, a small creature lying in the gravel with its eyes full of wariness and hope in equal measure. She thought about all the things she had been afraid of, walking into that new life alone. The silence, the smallness of the rooms, the unfamiliarity of her own company after so many years of not having to be alone with herself. None of it had been what she feared. The silence had become spacious. The small rooms had become hers. And herself, well, herself turned out to be someone worth getting to know again. "I think I am, baby," she said softly. "I really think I am." People often talk about turning points as though they are loud things, dramatic things. The kind of moments that arrive with music and significance and make their meaning immediately clear. But most of the turning points that matter are quiet ones. They are pulling over on a rainy road when you didn't have to. They are kneeling down and reaching out your hand to something frightened and waiting patiently, gently for it to decide whether to trust you. They are choosing, in the middle of grief, to be the kind of person who still stops. Dorothy Mercer did not save Samson on that Tuesday in September and then have her life transform overnight. It was slower than that, and more honest than that. It was walks in the morning and sketches at the kitchen table and learning to sleep in a quiet house and discovering, slowly, that the quiet was not emptiness but space that she could fill, on her own terms, with things that were genuinely hers. It was love of a particular kind, the uncomplicated, daily, faithful kind. The kind that greets you at the door every evening and asks nothing more of you than your presence. It was a limping shepherd mix with amber eyes who had been abandoned by the road and somehow found his way into the passenger seat of a yellow dress-wearing woman who was, herself, learning how to begin again. They had saved each other, really. That is how it usually works, if you let it. So if you are somewhere in the middle of your own hard chapter, if you are standing at the threshold of something new and unfamiliar, and a little frightening, perhaps the invitation is simply this. Keep driving, but pull over when something needs you. Reach out your hand and wait. You may be surprised what finds its way home.